Welcome back. You here with Goldberg. Today I'll be talking about this story and then future videos veering in a totally different direction because this is getting truly exhausting. All right. I see there being merit because we might be able to save a handful of FBA or foundational Black American lives by imparting this information before it's too late. And it's hard to reach that particular audience because they're always at odds. They always assume you're out to get them. So, as an example, you do a video on traveling as an American and advise don't draw attention to yourself, don't do performative nonsense, don't be loud and proud. Just respect where you are and don't stir up trouble. Most people, regardless of how they look, their background, makes sense. And yet, the algorithm will send a handful of these folks. They always show up, and it'll be like, stop hating on the brothers. You ain't scared about black men getting with women. And it's like, dude, have you even listened? Are you trying to process? Nah. So there's the merit, but we'll go later on in bringing up exactly how it will impact them. The story is from Minnesota, if I'm not mistaken. This woman, Shiloh Hendrix, she was out at the park with her infants, and there were some Somalians there. In key, a 5-year-old, though others said might have been a 10-year-old. The guardian, so-called, claiming he's autistic, but he was apparently stealing from her diaper bag. She got angry, called him some bad names, and then a Somalian man started recording her, trying to put her on blast with want to do a world star hip hop type dynamic. Now, back in the day, what would have happened? The Amy Cooper type dynamic, or that lady up in was Oregon, Washington, where the dude was chasing her, screaming, "You called me bad name," and filming. Your reputation is destroyed, and tolerance and diversity marches on. She didn't fall for that. She was unabashed. She held her ground, and then over $500,000 was raised in her defense. This upset a lot of black people, even though the people more directly affected were Somalian. FBA type Americans were enraged. A couple things quickly. They said she's a single mom. I believe that's untrue. They claim she was married to a brother, which I believe is also not correct. Whether the Somalian is a PDF file, I could not confirm. You have to remember with Somalis, they tend to look alike, they have similar names, and so there could be mistaken identity easily. I'm not going to assume it's true, so we're not just casting shade right away. But the question comes down to, is what she did correct or right, morally centered? I don't see the point in trying to throw slurs at a kid. I wouldn't venture to donate in her defense because I'm suspicious of these types that just pop up and make a ton of money, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's inorganic. You'll have these influencers that go, oh, they're trying to distract us from what the banksters are doing. There's the same types that will go, the banksters, the globalists, the Bilderbergers, the Freemasons. And two things can be true at the same time. The banksters could be ruining your money, and you will still have folks that encounter certain populations who are obnoxious. There is a part of me that is sympathetic to her in this sense. Throughout my life, I've dealt with these foreigners in retail, in the restaurant industry, just out and about. And I've seen how they try to game the system in Western countries. They know full well that if they act this way in their home, they're going to be beaten, not just by other private citizens, but by the police. They might be disappeared. And yet they come here and they try to force this on it. It's one of the reasons I don't believe immigrants should be patted on the back, have the red carpet rolled out. They should actually, there should be animosity towards them because it brings out better behavior than when they're mollycoddled. So not too long ago, actually, I was being Martin Karenberg, and a retail store. This is during the holiday season. You know, you're online. They have all the last minute goodies, the cookies, the candies, the stocking stuffers. And there's this family who I wager were Turkish, possibly Arab. The father did look like Cenk Uygur, and the kid was about 10 years old, but he was massive. Well, he goes up, opens a bag of candy, shoves a number of pieces inside, and then runs away with a very satisfied, albeit retarded, grin on his face. And we can consider, remember the articles in 2020, building lives matter too. Do you care about parasitical corporations? I don't. But the way I was raised, it's very clean cut when it comes to property. You don't just trespass. You don't just go into a store and take stuff that you didn't pay for. Even if you're at someone's house, you don't just grab food from their pantry or something like that. It's just the niceties of existence. And in general, we are held to these standards. Decent people, regardless of who you are, you're held to certain standards. In fact, if you're a good person, you see this in the workplace, you see this in dating. If you're a decent human being, you're held to much higher standards and they'll drop the anvil on you if anything goes wrong. But people that are troublemakers can get away with this nonsense constantly. So I turned and I said, "Hey, buddy, are you going to pay for the candy you took?" And he goes, "Duh, duh." And then the father mumbles up, "He has autism." Yeah, they all have autism or special needs. That's the line of defense. He starts berating the sister for not watching the kids. "Now we have to pay for the candy." I don't believe he would have purchased it, regardless, if he had known what the kid did. It's just that he got called out and then he had to cover his ass. And this is all too common. By the way, as an aside, what is it with Muslims having so many kids with developmental issues? I swear, you'll see one of the ninja garb women walking around. I've seen multiple times. They've got one or two of those reinforced wheelchairs where the kid looks like he's got some severe neurological issue, or the child is flat out inbred. And you go, "Oh, that's offensive." But let me ask you, if they're having these kids probably in the old country, if I were to guess, at least initially, and they're coming as refugees or diversity lottery, in the old country, you would imagine the food is probably grown there. It's more organic. So the kind of RFK, where's autism coming from? How are so many of these Arab kids, Middle Eastern children having mental problems? You'll see them at the protests in the UK. You're like, who's birthing these? I think they are engaging in coitus with with blood relations, and that's why you're seeing these outcomes in the West. But maybe I'm wrong and intolerant. Okay, so how does this relate back to foundational Black Americans? Well, for the longest time with the boomers, it was pretty easy for the types of African Americans who are loud and proud, defiant, who are quick to say, "I'm a file a discrimination lawsuit." They could get away with much that some would consider unjust, but that's the way it happened to play out. And you've heard these memes like the browning of America, with the assumption that it's going to lead to the uplifting of Black people. I see this as being quite untrue. Now, you're going to have your Barack the Booty Obamas, you're going to have your Wes Moore types, but these are productive citizens that aren't trying to go around and commit at least petty crimes, maybe white collar crimes, political corruption. As the boomers fade out, and the boomers had an environment, this epoch, where it was relatively easy to build a career, make investments, real estate, whatnot. Gen X, for the most part, turbo cucks, millennials are starting to wake up, although they didn't have it super bad. Gen Z, Gen Alpha, far worse. These are people who have had a hard time purchasing housing because the boomers are selling to BlackRock or to rich foreigners. They're not getting the jobs that were once available. During the pandemic, their businesses were forcibly shut down. Inflation's killing them. And so, what is the incentive to keep cuck dancing for the rainbow society? At one point, you said, "Okay, protect my plot. I'm going to have my beach house. I'll live fine. Just don't be too vocal." But these types, they're out of patience because there's not much reward for just being a good citizen who's, following MLK's dictums of be colorblind and judge by character. The rise of Hispanics, they've had conflicts with Black people going back to the 1960s in California. As much as we want to hope for this bronze Black alliance, I don't think it's going to materialize. Hispanics have already had issues with them when they move into communities. They fix them up because they're in construction, and Blacks say they're being replaced. East Asians, do I even have to go there? And then you have South Asians, and this is very interesting. So there was that video a few months ago of this Pooja screaming the hard R at some Shaniqua. And look, I'm just going to say it. Brother Amr was right. You white boys need to take one for the team. If you're, let's say, a white normie, you're 5'6", 5'7", perhaps you have blue eyes. You need to find some of these pujas and just say, hey, I'll give you a baby. Maybe you don't want to be the Beta Bucks Deluxe, but you are going to at least help them. The offspring will perhaps look Italian, maybe Hispanic, and you'll be doing the world some good. South Asians are some of the most resentful, hate filled people you'll ever come across, outside of those who actually, the upper crust ones who are more passing, because no matter the amount of money they make and their status, they don't get afforded true respect. Think of Chamath. He left his, I think it was high school or college sweetheart to get with this model, and he's trying to flex that, but deep down inside, he knows, billionaire or not, model or not, he's still a sub 5 curry cell, and they have a lot of anger. But now consider one of these dudes who comes over and he's thinking he's going to be CEO, but he's stuck working at a 7-Eleven. Or as these high-tech jobs begin to diminish, more of them will have to maybe go for being a police officer, a firefighter, a truck driver. And so they're interacting with the urban public a lot more. What's going to happen when you have an Indian judge, an Indian DA, Indian police officers, and there's some racism incident, and you're trying to claim that you should pull the race card on, you have a Tamil officer who's dark as night? I don't think that's going to go down very well. Remember that Indians have to suffer through the indignity of, despite being as dark as black people, when they appeal to racism, it doesn't help too much. And you have black people who might have a fraction of the wealth, but they can do that. They have that advantage in society. Plus, you can be a brother and smash decent looking women as long as you play up the thug stereotype. And yet no one is doing the same when it comes to the Indians. So they're very frustrated. And I look to them being quite unpleasant towards FBAs as demographics change over time. Give it 10, 15 years. This is my general prediction. Another factor that's impacting the black population is that whether Trump reduces welfare or maybe Wes Moore becomes president, you saw what happened with the Labour Party in the UK. They're worse on welfare in terms of maintaining it than the Conservatives. They're going to make those cuts, or inflation will cause the welfare handouts to not be worth as much. And then these municipalities, these colleges that are going bankrupt, they're going to have to find a means to save money. So they cannot afford to be paying out 10, 12, $15 million because Raekwon decided to be a tough guy with the cops. And you say, well, teach the cops not to be racist. The question there would be, is it that the cops are inherently racist because of indoctrination? Or is it the behavior of certain blacks that causes them to react in such a fashion? And which is going to be the easier solution from the standpoint of funding? Backing the cops or just putting caps on lawsuits? This is going to be very interesting. And I don't even dispel or deny the fact that blacks were treated roughly in the South or throughout the country in some cases in the past. But it's been pretty decent the last 3 or 4 decades. And that is coming to an end. And I don't believe that some of these FBAs are ready for a world in which they can't keep appealing to, well, because I'm black, you need to bow down and apologize. That's dangerous in more ways than one. Plus, you look at the black community itself. A lot of black dudes are trying to marry out. And contrary to the traditional assumption, you're seeing more children that come from these mixed unions that don't necessarily look black. If you pay attention to college basketball, even when they've got, let's say, a black father, sometimes they look Euro. They might have the frizzy hair, but their features are not African or stereotypically so. You must contend with the reality that black women, the educated ones, are not reproducing, that many of them don't want black men. This ratchet woman from Texas that does the alliteration, she sounds like an idiot, but she's popular for some reason. I thought she was maybe in her 30s, but she's 45 or just about. No marriage, no kids. The other one, Lauren Underwood's almost 40, not married, no kids. And what happens when you combine that with the rates of abortion? Now, who knows? Maybe Donaldo Trumpy is going to eliminate abortion in the United States and he'll be the true Black Lives Matter president. But the key takeaway from this is that you cannot assume 10, 15 years down the road, as the boomers expire, as whites don't have the same ability to control or like be dominant in the economic system, as these other groups are attaining more control over municipalities, police forces, the legal system. Do you believe they're going to be as forgiving towards black people, as accommodating as the boomers were? I don't think so. And this is why FBAs, apart from the ones that are very good at, you know, just being a decent citizen, the ones that are very defiant, that always want to challenge stuff, you got to be careful because you may not be dealing with the same animal as before. That's what I wanted to talk about. Hopefully, we can save some lives out here. Let me know what you think about Shiloh Hendrix. What do you think about this whole discussion? Will we have a continuation of the George Floyd peak in terms of racial reckoning, or is the reckoning going to be turned back on these populations due to their behavior, whether you think it is very much a problem or it's been exaggerated, whichever? Let me know.